He married an alien princess without seeing her. The wedding night changed everything. Elias Ward had never expected to become important. He was not a soldier who won famous battles, nor a scientist who changed history. He was a quiet man from a coastal city on Earth, trained in languages and diplomacy, the kind of person who listened more than he spoke. For most of his life, his work had been small: negotiating trade routes, translating alien law codes, smoothing arguments that never made the news. That was why his name surprised everyone when it appeared on the final treaty document. The war between Earth and the Velari Empire had lasted only 8 weeks. Humanity had prepared for a long conflict, but it ended before most civilians even understood what was happening. The Velari fleets did not destroy cities. They did not burn planets. They simply disabled satellites, shut down defenses, and surrounded Earth with quiet, unstoppable ships. The message was clear: resistance was pointless. The Velari did not want land. They did not want slaves. They wanted order. And Earth, young and loud and unpredictable, was a problem that needed to be controlled. The surrender terms were strange, old, and deeply alien. Among them was a demand no one expected: a marriage. Not between rulers, because Earth had none. Not between generals, because the Velari did not respect human military rank. Instead, they demanded a single human representative to marry into the imperial bloodline. A political union, a binding symbol, a message to the galaxy that humanity had been absorbed. At first, Earth's leaders argued. Then they panicked. Then they searched. They needed someone important enough to matter, but unimportant enough to lose. That was how Elias Ward was summoned to the council chamber. He stood alone in the massive room, surrounded by holographic stars and tired faces. Men and women who had not slept in days watched him like doctors watching a patient before surgery. "You understand what this means," the Secretary General said. Elias nodded slowly. "Yes." "You will represent Earth." "Yes." "You will marry a Velari royal." "Yes." "You may never return." Elias swallowed. "I understand." There was a long silence. Finally, one council member leaned forward. "Why did you accept so quickly?" Elias thought for a moment before answering. "Because if I didn't, someone else would, and they might be afraid." No one argued with that. The Velari wedding laws arrived 3 days later. They were ancient, complex, and absolute. Elias was not allowed to see his bride before the ceremony. Not her face, not her true form, not even a hologram. The Velari believed that first sight carried power. Human advisors protested. The Velari ignored them. The ceremony would take place on the imperial capital world, under Velari law, with Velari witnesses. Earth would be allowed only one observer. The galaxy watched. News networks across hundreds of species broadcast the event. Commentators spoke openly. Humans surrender without firing their final weapons. Earth trades freedom for survival. The weakest species bows. Elias heard none of it directly. By the time the broadcasts began, he was already aboard a Velari transport ship, moving faster than anything humanity had ever built. The ship was silent. No windows, no sense of motion. Velari attendants guided him politely but firmly. They spoke perfect human languages but showed no emotion. To them, Elias was not a man. He was a clause in a treaty. During the journey, he studied everything he could. Velari culture valued stability above all else. Change was dangerous. Emotion was controlled. Power was centralized and restrained by tradition. Their empire had lasted thousands of years not because they were violent, but because they were careful. Marriage in Velari society was not about love. It was about balance. That detail stayed in Elias' mind. The capital world was beautiful in a quiet, heavy way. Tall structures curved like stone frozen in motion. The sky was pale, almost white. Everything looked designed to last forever. The palace was older than human civilization. Elias was dressed in formal human clothing, simple and dark. No medals, no symbols. Earth had decided humility was safer. The wedding hall was vast. Velari nobles filled the space, tall and elegant, their forms partially hidden behind ceremonial coverings. Their eyes, large, reflective, unreadable, followed Elias as he walked alone toward the center. He felt small. The bride stood waiting. She was completely veiled, her shape obscured by layers of living fabric that shifted softly, like something breathing. Energy fields shimmered faintly around her, almost invisible but strong enough to make the air feel heavy. Elias did not look directly at her face. He had been warned. The ceremony was spoken in an ancient Velari dialect, translated quietly into his ear. Words older than nations bound them together in law and biology. When Elias spoke his vows, his voice did not shake. When the bride spoke hers, the room seemed to grow quieter, as if reality itself was listening. At the end, a final phrase echoed through the hall. The bond is sealed, the union stands, the night completes the law. The nobles bowed, the galaxy exhaled. To everyone watching, it was over. Humanity had knelt. The empire had won. Elias was escorted away, through halls that grew narrower and darker, deeper into the palace. No guards followed them beyond a certain point. Velari law was clear. What happened next belonged only to the bond. The chamber they entered was not a bedroom in the human sense. It was circular, with smooth walls that glowed faintly. Symbols were carved into the floor, patterns Elias did not recognize but felt somehow inside his chest. The doors closed behind them. For the first time since the war began, Elias was truly alone. The veil remained. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. Elias broke the silence carefully. "I was told I may speak now." "Yes," came the reply. Her voice was calm, controlled, and strangely layered, as if more than one tone existed at once. "I want you to know," Elias said slowly, "that I did not come here for power or fear. I came because my people needed time." There was no immediate response. Then the bride said, "You are different from the others they considered." Elias frowned slightly. "Others?" "Yes, there were generals, politicians, even one wealthy figure who offered gifts. And you chose me because I had none of that." "No," she said. "I chose you because you were willing to be forgotten." Something in her voice changed just slightly. "The veil may now be lifted," she said. Elias hesitated. Every instinct told him this moment mattered more than he understood. Slowly, carefully, he reached forward. The fabric withdrew. What he saw was not what the rumors had promised. She was not monstrous, not beautiful in a human way either. Her form was tall, graceful, and marked with faint lines of light beneath her skin, like stars under ice. But what drew his attention were the restraints. Bands of glowing energy circled her arms, her neck, her torso. They hummed softly, constantly adjusting, holding something back. "You are bound," Elias said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "Why?" She met his eyes fully for the first time. "Because without them," she said, "I would change everything." The symbols on the floor pulsed once. Elias felt something shift, not fear, not pain, but awareness. The wedding night had begun, and nothing, anywhere in the galaxy, would remain the same. Elias did not step back when he saw the restraints. He did not reach out either. He stood still, hands at his sides, breathing slow, as if the room itself might break if he moved too quickly. The symbols carved into the floor continued to glow, faint and steady, like a heartbeat. The air felt thick, not heavy in weight but full, as if something unseen was pressing against the walls of the chamber, waiting. "You would change everything," Elias said carefully, repeating her words. "How?" The alien princess tilted her head slightly. The motion was smooth, controlled. The light beneath her skin shifted with the movement, forming new patterns that faded just as quickly. "My people call it shaping," she said. "Others call it command. In your language there is no exact word." Elias frowned. "Is it like controlling matter?" She considered this. "That is one result, not the cause." The restraints pulsed softly, as if reacting to her thoughts. Elias felt the pressure in the room increase for a brief second, then return to normal. "You don't sound dangerous," he said. "That is because I am not allowed to be," she replied. He looked more closely at the restraints now. They were not chains in the human sense. They did not cut into her skin or force her into painful positions. Instead, they seemed to adjust constantly like living systems, responding to something inside her. "They look gentle," Elias said. "They are merciful," she agreed, "compared to the alternative." Silence stretched between them again. Elias walked slowly around the chamber, careful to stay within the glowing symbols. He felt them respond to his steps, warming slightly under his feet. The chamber was not just a room, it was a device. "Why tell me this now?" he asked. "Because the law requires truth once the bond is sealed," she said, "and because you deserve to understand what you have joined yourself to." Elias stopped walking. "Join myself to," he repeated. "Yes." She straightened, standing taller, though she had already been taller than him. Her eyes did not blink. "The Velari Empire is stable because we fear uncontrolled power," she continued. "We have destroyed ourselves before, long before your species learned to leave its cradle." Elias listened carefully. This was not something meant for outsiders. "In those ages," she said, "we believed rulers should be the strongest among us, the most capable, the most gifted." Her voice remained calm, but the light under her skin dimmed slightly, as if remembering something unpleasant. "They reshaped worlds. They ended wars before they began. They brought peace." "And?" Elias asked quietly. "And they decided what peace meant," she said. The restraints hummed louder for a moment. "When a single mind can alter reality," she went on, "there is no appeal, no balance, no future that is not chosen." Elias thought of human history, of kings, of weapons, of leaders who believed they knew what was best for everyone else. "So you bind your rulers," he said. "Yes, we restrain them, limit them, surround them with law and ritual so strong that even their power must obey." She paused. "Except the bond." Elias felt his stomach tighten. The marriage," she confirmed. "It is older than the restraints, older than the empire itself." He turned to face her fully. "Why keep it?" "Because it is the only thing that has ever worked." The chamber lights brightened slightly, reacting to something Elias could not sense. "The bond is not symbolic," she said. "It is biological, cognitive. It links two minds in specific ways." Elias swallowed. "And you linked it to me." "Yes." He let out a slow breath. "I don't have any special abilities." "That is precisely why you were chosen." Elias stared at her. "My people studied your species long before the war," she continued. "Humans adapt. You survive chaos. You build systems that function even when parts fail." "That doesn't sound impressive," Elias said. She almost smiled, almost. "To us," she said, "it is terrifying." Elias laughed once quietly before he could stop himself. The sound echoed strangely in the chamber. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's just we're always told we're too emotional, too divided, too unstable." "Yes," she replied. "And yet you endure." The restraints dimmed further. Elias felt the symbols beneath his feet grow warmer. "What exactly does this bond do?" he asked. "For you," she said. "Very little. For me, it changes everything." The air shifted again. Not violently, but noticeably, like the pressure change before a storm. "My mind no longer stands alone," she said. "Your presence creates interference, variability, limits." "Limits sound good," Elias said carefully. "They are," she agreed, "but they are not expected." Elias' communicator buzzed softly at his wrist. He hesitated, then glanced down. The signal was weak, distorted by the chamber's energy, but the message came through. "Earth Council, status request. Are you safe?" Elias looked back up at the princess. "I think," he said slowly, "that depends on how you define safe." She watched him closely as he responded. Elias typed a simple reply: "Stable, alive, no immediate threat." He did not know how true that was. The moment he sent the message, the symbols on the floor flared brighter. The restraints around the princess's arms loosened slightly, not enough to free her, but enough to be noticeable. Both of them felt it. She inhaled sharply for the first time since he had met her. "You should not communicate outside the bond yet," she said, her voice tighter than before. "I didn't say anything," Elias replied. "It is not what you said," she replied. "It is that you chose." The restraints hummed louder, struggling to compensate. Elias stepped back instinctively. "I didn't mean." "I know," she said quickly. "This is not blame, this is discovery." She closed her eyes. The chamber lights dimmed, then stabilized. "When Velari rulers bond with their own kind," she said, "the effect is predictable. Order reinforces order." "And with humans?" Elias asked. Her eyes opened. "With humans," she said, "order bends." Elias felt a strange sensation behind his eyes, like pressure building and releasing at the same time. Images flickered at the edge of his thoughts, stars, structures, systems layered over systems. He shook his head slightly. "I think something is happening." "Yes," she said softly, "you are beginning to perceive." "I don't want to control anything," Elias said quickly. "I don't want power." The restraints pulsed again, then loosened another fraction. "That," she said, "is why this is dangerous." Footsteps echoed faintly beyond the chamber walls, distant, rushed. "The court has noticed," she said. "They will be afraid." "Of you?" Elias asked. "Of us?" The word hung in the air. Elias thought of Earth surrounded by silent ships, of the treaty, of how quickly the war had ended. "What happens now?" he asked. "According to law," she said, "they will test the bond, measure its effects, decide if it is acceptable. And if it is," her gaze hardened, "then they will attempt to sever it." Elias' chest tightened. "Is that possible?" She hesitated, just for a moment. "Yes," she said, "but it has never been done without consequences." The chamber doors trembled slightly, as if struck by distant force. Elias took a step closer to her without thinking. "If they try to break it," he said, "what happens to you?" Her voice was very quiet. "I become what they fear." The restraints flickered, unstable now. Elias made a decision. He placed his bare hand on one of the glowing bands around her arm. The energy surged, but did not reject him. Instead, it softened. The symbols on the floor flared brilliantly. Outside the chamber, alarms began to sound. The galaxy had believed the wedding night was a formality. They were wrong. It was a beginning. Elias felt the warmth of the energy pulse under his hand, an unusual comfort and a warning at the same time. The restraints no longer hummed only with power, they responded to him. Every small shift in his body, every thought he allowed to linger, seemed to ripple across her form. It was unsettling, but he could not pull away. "You are unlike any human I expected," the princess said quietly. Her voice had a new calmness, but it carried weight. "You do not fear me, you do not seek to control me, you are patient." Elias gave a short laugh, almost nervous. "I'm not sure I should take that as a compliment." She tilted her head. "It is. Many others would have flinched. Run, beg for mercy. Your species rarely waits. Rarely listens." He looked down at his hand. "And now I'm touching a bound ruler." "Yes," she said. "And yet the bond is stronger because you touch without intent to dominate. Humans think too quickly in terms of victory and loss. You think differently." Elias felt a strange lightness, as if understanding was flowing through him in ways he couldn't name. The room itself seemed alive. The symbols on the floor glowed brighter, feeding on the connection between them. He realized the chamber had been built not just to contain, but to amplify the power within the bond. "The court will know soon," she said. "They will not understand what is happening." "Will they try to stop it?" he asked. "They will," she admitted. "They fear the unknown more than rebellion. Your presence, your mind changes the rules. They cannot calculate it." Elias swallowed. "Then what do we do?" "Observe, learn, respond," she said, "and survive." He took a step back, watching her closely. "I don't know if I can do this," he said honestly. "I'm not trained for this kind of whatever this is." "You are trained," she said gently, "in the only way that matters. Humans survive, you endure chaos, you adapt. You build systems that even the most complex machines cannot anticipate. That is why you were chosen. Elias nodded slowly. So, I'm supposed to be an anchor for you. Yes, for now, she said. Her eyes reflected soft lines of light like constellations shifting across her irises. And soon, perhaps more. But first we must ensure the court cannot undo this. The first knock came not long after. Heavy, deliberate, Elias froze. "They will test us," the princess said. Her voice was calm, but the energy beneath her skin pulsed faster. "Prepare yourself. This is part of their law. It is not malice. It is ritual." Elias followed her silently as she moved toward the center of the chamber. The symbols under their feet responded to every motion, glowing brighter with each step. The air felt charged, almost alive. The doors opened slowly, revealing a delegation of Velari nobles. They were tall, imposing, and elegant, wearing ceremonial robes that shimmered like liquid metal. Their eyes flicked to the princess and then to him, lingering for a fraction too long on the glowing restraints. One of them spoke, a male noble with sharp features. "Your union has been noted, princess, and yet the court requires verification." The princess did not flinch. "You have your verification," she said evenly. "Observe, but do not interfere." The noble's gaze shifted to Elias. "And you, human, are expected to cooperate." Elias inclined his head. "I intend to." Another noble stepped forward, raising a hand toward the symbols on the floor. "We will measure the alignment, the bond's strength, and its effects on both parties." Elias felt a sudden nervousness. It was one thing to survive the flight here or the ceremony. It was another to have a room full of people watching the bond itself, assessing every reaction, every response. The symbols glowed brighter. A soft hum filled the chamber, vibrating under Elias' feet. He glanced at the princess. "Do not fear," she said. "It will not harm you, not unless you allow it." He swallowed, steadying himself. "I will not allow it." The nobles began chanting softly in their language, a rhythm of words that Elias could not understand. The floor patterns responded, lights shifting, pulsing. The air thickened. The restraints around the princess glowed brighter, vibrating like a calm storm. Elias focused on breathing, on remaining steady. He could feel the energy of the chamber pressing into him, tugging at thoughts he did not want to confront. Fear, doubt, hesitation. He pushed it down. He focused instead on the reality before him, the princess, the bond, the symbols, the rhythm of the nobles. Slowly he noticed something remarkable. The more calm he remained, the less the restraints hummed violently. His presence seemed to stabilize her and in turn the chamber. One of the nobles frowned, noticing the change. "It diminishes," he muttered to another. "She does not falter," the other replied. "Yet the human." Elias felt the recognition in their words before fully understanding it. The court had expected her alone to be tested, not together with a human. But together, their minds were unpredictable. Stable in some ways, impossible to calculate in others. The princess turned slightly to him. "You see, they cannot control this." I think I do," Elias said. "But why me? Any other human would fail this." "Because you do not fear," she said simply. "Because you are willing to endure. Because your mind is flexible. That is why." The nobles paused their chanting, confused. One of them took a cautious step forward, extending a hand as if to interrupt, but the symbols under Elias' feet flared, bright and sharp. The air tightened around the chamber enough that the noble's robe shifted as if caught in a wind. He froze. "Do not test us," the princess said. Her voice carried an authority that seemed beyond the human sense of sound. It resonated inside the room, inside Elias, inside the very air. The noble faltered, then withdrew his hand. Others looked to each other uncertainly. The court had anticipated obedience, compliance, predictability. Elias realized the moment they did not find it, uncertainty spread like wildfire. Elias felt a strange satisfaction. He did not feel pride, not yet. but he felt something akin to hope. The princess turned toward him again. "They will not stop observing," she said. "But you are holding the balance. Continue to do so and the bond remains unbroken. Fail and consequences may be severe." Elias nodded. "I understand, but what is the consequence?" She hesitated for the first time since he had met her. "If the bond fails, if the chamber detects disruption too severe, I cannot guarantee restraint will survive. The results would be catastrophic for anyone present." Elias swallowed. "So basically we cannot fail." "No," she said softly, "we must succeed." The nobles continued their examination, though their movements were slower, careful. Each step, each gesture seemed measured. They could not predict how the bond would react to Elias, nor how the princess would respond with him nearby. Hours passed. Elias focused. The energy in the room ebbed and flowed like a tide, but it did not overwhelm him. He noticed patterns in the symbols on the floor, subtle shifts in color and pulse that mirrored the princess's breathing, her own internal rhythm. The bond had begun to integrate with him, and he felt it in small ways. A tug at his thoughts, a hint of awareness beyond normal perception, a clarity that allowed him to predict some of the chamber's reactions before they happened. The nobles, chanting, slowed. Their confidence weakened. One by one they stepped back, glancing at one another with uncertainty. At last the lead noble spoke. "The test is concluded," he said. His voice was strained, careful. "The bond appears stable. The court will deliberate." Elias exhaled slowly. His hands tingled from the residual energy. He looked at the princess, whose restraints glowed faintly, almost gently now. "You did well," she said quietly. "Much better than expected." "I did nothing," Elias said. "You controlled everything." "Not everything," she said. "You helped. You held the balance. That is what made the difference." The chamber was quiet now, the glowing symbols returning to their steady, calm pattern. The nobles lingered for a few more moments, then withdrew. The doors closed behind them. Silence returned. Elias slumped slightly, exhausted. The room felt heavier now, though the energy had settled. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," she said, "but this is only the beginning." He nodded. "I expected that." She moved closer, careful within the space of the symbols. "Tomorrow they will summon us again. More tests. The court is curious. But now you understand a little more about your role. You are not just a symbol. You are part of the system, part of me." Elias looked at her, and for the first time he felt something like awe. Humanity had been told it was weak, that it could survive by cunning, maybe, but never by strength. Here, in the Velari Palace, Elias realized that human strength could take forms the Velari could not even calculate. "We survived the first night," he said quietly. "Now we face the next." "Yes," she said, "and the next and the next. The bond will be tested always, but together we will endure." For the first time, Elias felt the weight of what that truly meant. It was not victory, it was not power, it was responsibility. And it was enormous. The night stretched on. The symbols pulsed gently under their feet, the chamber calm, waiting. Outside, the empire slept. But in that room, in the quiet glow of light and energy, two minds had begun to merge in ways no one could have predicted. The bond had survived the first test. But the galaxy, as Elias now knew, was about to wake. The sun, or what passed for a sun on the Velari capital world, had long dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a pale gray. Elias had expected the palace to be silent after the previous night's tests, but he found it alive in ways he did not understand. Hallways glimmered faintly with the palace's energy fields. Corridors that had seemed empty before now pulsed like veins in a living organism. Every step he took resonated in the floor patterns, an echo that reminded him that he was no longer merely a visitor. The princess walked beside him, her movements smooth, deliberate, almost mechanical. But every now and then, Elias noticed a faint flutter in the light under her skin. He realized she was adjusting herself constantly, her body and the restraints responding to the lingering effects of the previous night. "The court is unsettled," she said quietly. Her voice had an edge of amusement. They expected this to be simple. They did not anticipate a bond that behaves unpredictably. Elias followed her gaze. The palace itself seemed calm, yet he felt the tension like a hidden current beneath the smooth floors and shining walls. "Unpredictable how?" he asked. "They anticipated that I would resist, that the human would falter. Instead," she glanced at him briefly, a spark of acknowledgement in her alien eyes. "You did not falter. That is enough to make them nervous." He swallowed. "And dangerous." "Yes," she said. "When humans adapt quickly and I respond naturally, the rules shift. That terrifies them more than outright defiance." Elias kept pace with her, observing everything. The palace was a place built not just to house the Velari rulers but to contain them, to structure their power and focus it in predictable patterns. He had seen how the chamber had responded to the bond, but he now realized the entire palace was an extension of that system. Each room, each corridor, each symbol embedded in the floors and walls was designed to test, to measure, to guide. "The court will convene again today," she continued. "They want to study the bond further. They will measure, analyze, attempt to detect flaws." "And if they find one?" Elias asked, trying to keep his voice calm. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she moved toward a windowless observation chamber. The walls here were smooth, with symbols etched faintly into every surface. The lights beneath their feet dimmed slightly as if the palace itself was preparing for scrutiny. "If a flaw is detected," she said finally, "it is not simply a matter of law. It is a matter of control. They will try to separate us, sever the bond, force it into compliance." Elias nodded slowly. "And if it fails," she looked at him directly, "if it fails, the result would be catastrophic for me, for you, and for anyone foolish enough to interfere." He flinched slightly but kept his posture straight. "So we cannot fail." "Correct," she said simply. "We endure. That is all we do." They entered the observation chamber, and Elias felt the energy shift immediately. Symbols on the floor reacted differently here, glowing brighter as he stepped into the center. The room seemed smaller, though it was actually larger than the previous chamber. The walls pulsed with a faint hum that matched the rhythm of the restraints around the princess. The court entered shortly after, more numerous this time. Velari nobles, advisors, and observers crowded into the room, their eyes sharp, their expressions unreadable. Elias noted the difference immediately. The humans he had met on Earth reacted to him with a mixture of curiosity and empathy, but these Velari observed without judgment. Every gesture was measured, every word chosen. The lead noble spoke first. "The bond appears stable, yet stability alone does not satisfy the court. We require demonstration of compatibility under stress." Elias glanced at the princess. She inclined her head slightly and the restraints pulsed in response. He realized she was already aware of what they were planning. "What kind of stress?" he asked. "Varied," the noble replied. "Simulations, environmental manipulations, psychological stimuli. The bond must endure all without deviation." Elias took a deep breath. "And if it does, then the court will acknowledge it as legitimate. The human will be recognized as co-regent." Co-regent. The word felt heavy on his tongue. He had agreed to a political marriage, to a symbolic bond, and now he faced the possibility that this bond could elevate him far beyond anything he had imagined. The princess spoke softly to him. "Do not be surprised by what comes next. The simulations are designed to push us, but they will also reveal what we can do together. Focus on balance, on observation. The rest is instinct." Elias nodded. "I understand." The first test began with a change in gravity. The floor beneath them pulsed, altering the force of their bodies subtly but perceptibly. Elias felt his feet press harder against the ground, muscles engaging in ways they were not used to. The princess moved with ease, but Elias noticed the restraints adjusting automatically, responding to the shift. The nobles observed quietly, their eyes narrowing. The humans on Earth would have panicked, he thought. But he focused, feeling the rhythm of the symbols beneath him, the subtle feedback from the bond itself. He adjusted his stance, his breathing, his focus. The pressure lessened slightly, enough to keep him upright without strain. The next test involved sound. A low-frequency hum filled the chamber, vibrating through the walls, through the floor, and through their bodies. Elias could feel it in his chest, a deep resonance that made his teeth vibrate and his vision blur for a moment. He glanced at the princess. Her eyes remained steady, but the light beneath her skin flared slightly with each pulse of the sound. He realized that she was compensating for the vibrations, stabilizing herself, and by extension, the bond. Elias took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment. He imagined a calm center inside him, a place where he could anchor the energy, absorb it without resistance. The symbols on the floor pulsed in response, brighter now, matching the rhythm of his focus. The nobles murmured among themselves. One of them stepped forward, clearly startled by the stability they were witnessing. "This is not within expectations," he whispered to another. "Keep observing," the other replied. "Do not interfere." Elias opened his eyes and found himself measuring each pulse, each vibration, adjusting subtly without even thinking about it. The bond responded instantly. He could feel her anticipation, her control, her awareness. Together, they became more than the sum of their parts. The next test involved illusions, visions projected into the chamber, images of disaster, of falling, of fire, of screaming civilians. The air thickened as the chamber's energy field simulated chaos. Elias' stomach churned, but he forced himself to focus, grounding himself in observation and rhythm. The princess's eyes widened briefly, the light beneath her skin intensifying, then dimmed as she drew on the bond on Elias, stabilizing her reactions. He realized with a jolt that he was not only stabilizing himself but amplifying her control, keeping the chaos at bay with sheer concentration. The illusions intensified, projecting entire cities collapsing, alien armies invading, human allies dying. The Velari nobles leaned forward, eyes sharp, expecting the princess to falter, expecting her to overreact. But she did not, and Elias did not. Together, they formed a quiet center of calm, a counterbalance to the chaos projected around them. The symbols on the floor glowed brightly, pulsing like a heartbeat, feeding energy into their combined presence. The nobles recoiled slightly. The tests were meant to break her, to challenge her limits. Instead, they revealed something unprecedented. The bond was not only stable, it amplified control, focus, and clarity. At last, the simulations ended. The chamber quieted, and the symbols beneath them returned to their steady glow. The princess exhaled softly, the restraints flickering dim, calm. Elias felt a thrill of exhilaration, but he kept it contained. He understood that the tests were only beginning. There would be more, harder challenges. The court would not easily accept what they could not predict. One of the nobles finally spoke, voice low but firm. "The bond, it behaves unexpectedly. The human contributes in ways we did not anticipate." The princess turned to Elias. "You see, you are not a symbol, you are not a pawn. You are an essential element." Elias nodded, though he did not feel ready to fully comprehend it. "Essential meaning that the Empire underestimated your kind," she said simply. "Humanity is not weak. It adapts, it survives, and it stabilizes power in ways no Velari could calculate." Elias felt the weight of her words. All the mocking messages, all the predictions that humans were too chaotic, too emotional, too weak, they were wrong. Here, in the palace of an ancient empire, he realized that humans could not only survive, they could elevate forces far beyond what others expected. The nobles left the chamber shortly after, their expressions unreadable, their whispers echoing faintly down the hallways. Elias turned to the princess. "So, they can't stop it," he said quietly. "No," she said, "not without risking everything. That is why you were chosen. That is why humans endure." Elias exhaled slowly. "And what now?" "Now," she said, "we prepare for the next challenge. The court will push further, but we are ready." He glanced at the glowing symbols beneath their feet. The bond pulsed softly, a reminder of the night, the tests, the truth. Humanity had been underestimated, and now Elias realized it was time for the Empire to learn a very important lesson. The night stretched on, quiet but alive with energy. Outside, the Velari capital slept, unaware of the quiet revolution happening within the observation chamber. Inside, two minds had begun to merge in ways the galaxy could not yet understand. And the galaxy, Elias knew, would never be the same. The morning light on the Velari capital world was pale and uncertain, casting long, muted shadows across the palace. Elias had not slept. Not because he was afraid, but because the events of the past days had shifted his mind into a new rhythm, one that mirrored the subtle pulses of the bond between him and the princess. The palace no longer felt like a structure made of stone and metal. It was alive, responsive, an organism tuned to energies he was only beginning to understand. The princess moved beside him, calm and deliberate, though Elias noticed small changes in her posture, tiny adjustments of her shoulders, the slight tilt of her head, as if she too were waking to a new awareness. The restraints that had bound her so strictly now pulsed softly, reacting not only to her but to him as well. Together, they formed a system the Velari had never anticipated. "They are convening the court today," she said quietly, her voice carrying a note of anticipation. "They want to witness the bond in action under full scrutiny. They will bring observers, scientists, historians, even military advisors. And if they challenge it again," Elias asked, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "They will," she said simply. "But this time we will show them more than stability. We will show them what humans bring." Elias considered her words. The first tests had been about endurance, about survival. The second had been about balance under pressure. Now the court would not merely measure. It would attempt to predict, to control, to calculate. And that was the moment he had been waiting for without knowing it. They entered the main hall where the court had gathered. Hundreds of Velari nobles and advisors filled the space, their tall, elegant forms surrounding a central platform. On it, symbols of the Empire's law glowed faintly, embedded in the floor and walls. Every eye turned to the princess and then to him. Elias could feel the expectation, the curiosity, and beneath it the faint undertone of fear. The lead noble, a tall figure with a face lined by authority, spoke first. "The bond has been observed. The tests have been reviewed, yet questions remain. The court seeks full demonstration, proof that this union strengthens the empire rather than threatens it." The princess stepped forward, moving with her usual grace. "The bond has already demonstrated its power, stability under strain, resistance to disruption, harmony in chaos. But if the court demands further evidence," her voice trailed, almost challenging the room without needing to. Elias felt the pull of the energy beneath their feet. The symbols responded to their presence as if alive, sensing the tension in the air. He stepped closer to the princess, and the light beneath her skin intensified slightly. The restraints did not tighten, they adapted, responding to the bond that now flowed between them. The lead noble raised his hand. "We will begin the assessment." Environmental simulation, followed by psychological stress, followed by temporal synchronization. Elias glanced at the princess. "Temporal synchronization," she nodded. "They will attempt to test our reactions over accelerated time. To see if the bond holds when perception and response are stretched. It is the most dangerous test yet. One failure could be catastrophic." He inhaled slowly. "Then we proceed together." The chamber around them shifted immediately. Symbols beneath their feet pulsed brightly, flowing into intricate patterns that Elias could only barely comprehend. The walls themselves seemed to ripple. The air thickened and then lightened, creating waves of sensation that pressed against his body and mind. He focused as he had learned on observation, on balance, on the rhythm of the bond. The first phase began. Gravity shifted, subtly at first, then more dramatically. The floor beneath them curved, tilted, and undulated, forcing him to adjust constantly. The princess moved with effortless grace, the restraints glimmering faintly with each motion. Elias felt a tug in his mind as the bond responded. He centered himself, drawing on the calm that had allowed him to stabilize her previously, and for the first time he realized something extraordinary. The bond was not just stabilizing, it was amplifying their combined strength. The Velari court observed in silence. Their calculations had failed. Their predictions had been wrong. The human was not a liability. He was an anchor, a stabilizing influence that the Empire had never considered. Next came the psychological phase. The chamber shifted again, projecting visions of war, disaster, famine, and betrayal. Voices echoed, screams reverberated, and light flickered across the walls in chaotic patterns. Many humans would have panicked. Many Velari might have faltered. But Elias focused, grounding himself, drawing strength from the awareness of the princess beside him. Her own power flowed into him subtly, and he responded in turn, reinforcing her control. Together, they created a calm center within the storm. The room itself seemed to respond. The projections dimmed, the voices softened, the light stabilized. The nobles whispered among themselves, uncertainty flickering across their faces. The Empire had never seen a human contribute in such a way. Finally, the temporal synchronization test began. Time in the chamber accelerated in unpredictable waves. Elias could see events play out in fractions of seconds and then slow to normal speed. Every movement, every thought, every pulse of energy required focus beyond ordinary comprehension. His mind raced, but he remained grounded. The princess adjusted herself constantly, the restraints shifting with her movements, responding to the bond, responding to him. Elias realized that he was not controlling her, nor she him. They were partners, each amplifying the other, creating a system the Velari could not calculate or predict. Hours passed, though the accelerated time made it feel like minutes and centuries at once. The nobles grew tense, unsettled by the demonstration. Their careful calculations, their centuries of study, were meaningless here. The human had changed the rules. The bond was no longer a symbol of submission, it was a force of stability and power. At last, the test concluded. The chamber returned to normal, the symbols glowing faintly, the air calm. Elias exhaled slowly, exhaustion pressing into him, but it was a good kind of exhaustion, the kind that came from knowing he had endured, that he had contributed. The princess turned to him, her eyes reflecting faint constellations beneath her skin. "You see," she said softly, "they expected a weak human, they expected fear. Instead, we have changed everything." Elias nodded, still catching his breath. "We've survived." "But they will understand eventually. They will realize what this bond truly is." "They will," she said, "and when they do, humanity will no longer be underestimated." The lead noble stepped forward, hesitating, as if unsure how to address what had just occurred. "The court acknowledges the bond. It is stable. It is unprecedented. The human has demonstrated qualities that the Empire did not anticipate." Elias felt a small, quiet surge of pride, not for himself but for his species. All the mocking messages, all the dismissive predictions, they had been wrong. Humanity was not weak. Humanity adapted, endured, and survived in ways even an ancient empire could not calculate. The princess extended her hand toward Elias. "The court has recognized our union. But more importantly, they have recognized something else." He took her hand, feeling the pulse of energy under her skin, the subtle tug of the bond, the awareness that they were stronger together than apart. "What?" he asked. That humans are not merely subjects, she said. They are not merely survivors. They are architects, stabilizers, partners in power. And now the Empire knows it. Outside the chamber, the whispers of the court spread like wildfire. Across the capital, across fleets, across planets, word would travel quickly. Humanity had survived what the Velari considered an impossible test, and in doing so had revealed potential the Empire could not ignore. Elias realized, for the first time, the true significance of the wedding night. It had not been a submission. It had not been a formality. It had been an opportunity, a chance for humanity to demonstrate qualities that no one, not even the most ancient scholars of the Velari, had predicted. The princess looked at him, a faint smile forming. "You did not see me before the ceremony, and yet you have anchored me. You have become more than a symbol. You are co-regent. You are essential." Elias swallowed. Co-regent, the word felt heavy with responsibility but also with possibility. That means humanity matters. "Yes," she said softly, "it has always mattered." The Empire simply did not understand until now. He looked around the chamber, at the nobles who still lingered, their expressions uncertain, their calculations failing. The palace itself seemed to acknowledge him, the symbols beneath their feet glowing softly in quiet approval. "Do you think they will accept it?" he asked. "Eventually," she said. "Not all of them immediately. But what they cannot ignore is the truth. Humanity endures, humanity adapts, and humanity transforms systems that others believe are unchangeable." Elias exhaled a long, steady breath. "Then we've won, in a way." "Yes," she said, "but winning is only the beginning. Now we guide the Empire. Now we shape the future together." The palace was quiet again, but it felt different, alive, aware, responsive. Elias realized that he had changed the rules of engagement not through force or fear, but through understanding, focus, and endurance. Humanity had not conquered the Velari with weapons. Humanity had conquered with what made it strong: adaptability, courage, and the ability to survive chaos. The princess's eyes glimmered. "The galaxy will hear of this. Other species will reconsider what they think of humanity. And they will learn what humans can do when underestimated." Elias nodded slowly, feeling the full weight and promise of her words. He had been chosen for a political union, but what he and the princess had accomplished was more than ceremony. It was proof. Proof that humans were not weak. Proof that survival was not enough. Proof that the underestimated could become indispensable. And as the palace lights pulsed gently, as the symbols beneath their feet glowed in quiet affirmation, Elias realized that the wedding night had not changed him alone. It had changed the Empire. The Velari had assumed control. Humanity had proven otherwise. And from that night forward, the galaxy would remember not the submission of humans, but their endurance, their intelligence, and their undeniable strength. Elias took a deep breath, looking at the princess, at the chamber, at the Empire itself. The future was uncertain, dangerous, and exhilarating. But for the first time in his life, he felt not fear but power, not domination but understanding. Humanity had been underestimated, and now humanity would guide the course of history alongside one of the most ancient empires in the galaxy. The wedding night had ended, but the story had only just begun.